Good morning and welcome to the May edition of our Safety Action Safety Update. So welcome to everyone who's able to join us live, and for anyone who may watch us on our website at a later date, welcome to today's session. Let's have a look at what we're going to cover this morning and what I'd like to share with you. Our main topic of our newsletter this month was preventing tomorrow's incidents today. And maybe it's my sense of humour, but this intrigued me when I came across this heading. And so I crafted the article that we've got there, which I'm going to talk to shortly. Obviously, with recent discussions around the war over in the Middle East and problems with fuel, some issues have come up with stockpiling of fuel. So we're going to give you some tips, just so people know the volumes and precautions that you should be undertaking in this area. Also, increasingly, we're seeing a different trend in workers' compensation claims. So people traditionally got injured with they broke their arm or they cut their hand or something of that nature. Increasingly, the largest volume of claims are not in that category at all. It's actually turned into what we call subjective injury. So I'm going to talk to this subject as well. There's also a change in how the courts are treating some of the manual handling claims that are coming before them. I'm going to discuss that. And does selecting recycled air in your car coming into winter, we want the car to be warm quickly, and so we may turn off fresh air to go to recycle, and this does build up the level of carbon dioxide gas in the car. But is this dangerous? So I'll be talking to that as we go through the session. And also just this little point about low incivility, low level incivility. What is that and what does it mean and why is it important? So let's kick off. As you know, I usually like to start with a question of the week. So my first question, I have two of them this week. Question one, what is the maximum distance workers can be from an emergency exit? So this will be primarily from an office. It could be an office within a warehouse. It could be, or a location within a warehouse. It could be within a factory, a point within the factory. But primarily we have lots of little walkways around offices. So there you go. So what's the maximum distance you can be from an exit? We'll come back to this at the end of the session. You may know the answer. I'm going to give you my ideas of that. And we also have a fact sheet coming up mid-month around this subject as well. Question two, how frequently are we required to inspect workshop equipment? So most or many businesses have a workshop associated with their activity to maintain tools, equipment, plant, etc. And so you'll have a variety of workshop equipment. So how often are we required to inspect that? That's what we'll look at. So let's return to our main topic today, preventing tomorrow's incidents today. A very intriguing and tempting topic, I think. It's like the Holy Grail. If we could do this, we're not going to have any accidents. We're not going to have any serious incidents that occur. So let's have a look. So what is a near miss? And you may come across a variety of different definitions, but put simply, it's an unplanned event that could have caused an injury or damage, but fortuitously did not. So let's accept that as a reasonable definition of a near miss. And so why is it important to focus on the near misses? Because you will find many people will say it was minor, and it was always going to be minor given my circumstances or whatever it happens to be, whatever that near miss was. And I think part of the focus and maybe part of our immediate response to our team in this area is yes, but next time the circumstances may be slightly different and the outcome may be far more serious. So this is, I think, our standard answer to why it is important to have the team to report near misses and minor incidents, whatever they may be, because next time it may be more serious. And I think that can be your standard default answer And people, I think, will get it if indeed you explain it in that way. However, one of the things I have found from my many years of experience in safety and dealing with executive teams and boards, and this is not a criticism of them here, but what I can tell you is when they see a dramatic increase in the number of incidents reported, whether they're serious or not, they start to panic and they think and they ask, maybe quite rightly they ask, has our safety program deteriorated? Why are we now getting more incident reports than we have ever had, or a greater trend than we've had in recent years? And I think that's a reasonable question for the boards and executive teams to ask, particularly if they've not been informed of what you've been trying to do. And what you've been probably trying to do is to encourage reporting of all incidents. So my little tip today is, before you go down this route, share what you're planning to do with your executive team and board if you have that opportunity to speak to the board or put a paper to them to explain that the importance of focusing on near misses and minor incidents, and that what you're doing is you're planning to significantly increase encouragement of reporting and collecting this information and reporting it, and tell them you should expect to see an increase in these lower level incidents at the bottom, not serious accidents, but you should see this. And this is a good thing because we're actually getting greater reporting of these minor incidents. So, it's always that classic question, is an increase in reporting a good thing or a bad thing? And it's bad if, of course, our safety is dropping off, but it's a good thing if this was part of your plan. This is what you were planning to do. So now you've got your exec and board informed. They're not going to hopefully overreact in a negative way now, and they may well support you with positive reinforcement of what's happening. So the next level down is in fact the frontline managers and supervisors. How do they react when somebody tells them about a near miss or an incident? Now, you and I don't want these things to happen, particularly if it could have caused serious harm, but we're only lucky. And so we may frown and say, well, you shouldn't have done that. You should have done it in a different way. What we want to do is coach frontline supervisors and managers in tone and manner. And secondly, firstly, up front, to thank people for reporting the issue. I always jokingly say, if somebody's got to be whipped, the whippings and canings can wait till later. So if discipline is required out of something, that's a separate issue that can wait till later. Up front, firstly, thank you for letting us know. This is important. This is good. And maybe in some companies, people, frontline managers and supervisors can even provide minor rewards to encourage people and to demonstrate and show that this was good and it was something that we wanted them to do. So follow those little points through. This is how we can get that information about trends in incidents. And often there are minor little incidents and near misses that occur before serious accidents. It's rare that you've been operating for many years and then out of the blue with no other information or issues arising that a serious accident occurs. Often the local team will know there were certain little things that were happening. They're relatively minor. It would be nice, without shouting from the rooftops, if that was raised at team meetings, toolbox talks, or in your reporting system, that there was something happened, something we didn't expect, something that shouldn't have occurred, but just letting you know. So thankfully not serious, but just letting you know. If you're collecting data on this as a good safety manager, you will start to see a trend. And this is what may be helpful for you. So there's some just little tips from my view or from my perspective and experience. And maybe in those toolbox talks, you can ask people to give a brief presentation and talk to, say, tell us what's happened in the last week, last month. Has there been any near misses and incidents? What were they? Can you describe what they were and how they happened? So rather than you telling the story, maybe ask the team to. And this could be a great thing for safety committee meetings, team meetings, toolbox talks. So there's some little tips. So let's look at this area of subjective injuries and objective injuries. An objective injury is one that is patently clear and obvious it's happened. So if somebody has a laceration to their hand, that is clearly visible. You can see people that are bleeding. You can maybe a broken arm, you may not see as easily, but the pain and the dislocation or whatever and the treatment will be objectively measured by, for example, a doctor, and we can clearly state that this injury has happened. And so what we've got is from, if you like, turn of the century or going back hundreds of years, up to the 1950s. I'm just rounding these off. They were incident based. So when somebody reported an injury, there was a clear incident that happened with it. I fell off the scaffold. I fell off the ladder and broke my arm. I tripped over on that ditch and sprained my wrist or something of this nature. And so what we see from the 1960s, and I'm actually just making this in very broad categories here, so please don't write in and tell me I've got the dates wrong. This is just a broad trend of what's happening. Obviously, there's an overlay. We start to see far more overexertion and back injuries occurring, and there was no incident associated with it. It's just I'm doing my work, and over a period of time, I've now got a sore back. So this, and my work has actually caused this. And this is not to say these are wrong, by the way. I'm just explaining. I think these are quite real. It's how it's actually evolving into our workers' compensation system and maybe incident and accident data recording. From about the 1980s, so bear with me, I started full-time as a safety engineer in workplace safety in the early 1980s. And one of the things that was thrown at me in the business I worked for at the time was this thing of repetitive strain injuries, primarily at that time with typists. And it actually got the nickname Australian Paw. You may or may not have heard of that, and I'm not trying to be derogatory, but it was actually called that because it was only Australia that experienced it in the volume and the rate and the rapid uptake that we did. And the medical profession didn't know what it was, didn't know what caused it, didn't know how long it was going to take to heal or to treat, or what was the best treatment. And I recall one secretary in the business where I worked got a medical certificate for 12 months off, 1 year off. And she moved up to the Gold Coast and holidayed with friends for a year on full pay because the doctors just didn't know and couldn't risk putting her back on typing duties. And that was her role. And so it was a very unknown thing, a scary thing at the time. So people thought, you're going to be permanently injured. You'll never be able to work or do repetitive tasks again. So this is evolving what we knew, what the medical profession knew about this. We know a lot more about it today, and the likely causes. And it would appear that the old typewriters, we use much bigger muscles in our arms. Yes, I'm hearing, thanks, Linda, very common in factories as well. You're right, not just typists, but older machinery and typewriters use bigger muscles. And today we're just using a lot more finger. So this is using different, the tendons in the hands and up into the wrists, moving a lot quicker and a lot more frequently. We're actually typing at a higher rate. We're probably using a lot of factory equipment at a higher rate because of those very fine movements. And humans were not evolved to actually do a lot of this. And so we end up with tendon problems down through the wrists and the arms. And that's my basic understanding of that area. So here we are, repetitive strain injuries. It's happened a lot earlier, but in fact from about the 2000s onwards, mental health became better recognised as one of the workplace issues that we need to be aware of. And of course, into the 1920s and now, we're hearing a lot more about psychosocial hazards and risks. So today's not about talk about that. I just want to talk about, so here's the trend. And so what we're seeing is a trend. It is not inappropriate it's actually real, and the background to Australian poor repetitive injuries is real. People suffered real injuries. I'm not trying to tell you because we couldn't measure it and didn't know what it was that they were not real. They were real. We just, even the medical profession didn't understand it. Maybe we're still coming to learn about psychosocial hazards and where the boundary is, and how have we gone far enough. So the key point is subjective injuries. The reason many businesses and managers may be skeptical is because we rely a lot more on the individual to say, I am suffering, I have pain, I have stress. And it's not as easy for the medical profession to confirm independently. So I also pack sizes of products. So sorry, the little chat line just pops up on my screen, team. So I just tried to read out part of one of a chat line there. So thanks for that contribution. Yeah, lots of different ways that this can come about. And so the skepticism may be because it can't always be 100% independently verified. And of course, the medical profession and, if you like, psychologist profession are working hard to get a better handle around psychosocial hazards and how they relate to our workplace. And every jurisdiction now has regulations in these areas. So today was just to point out that there are this growing trend. We need to get better at it to understand it. And bear with me, I'm just searching very quickly in my notes. I wanted to share with you a couple of cases that came up, and I thought I had a copy of them here. I don't. So there's some recent compensation cases around subjective injuries and where the courts have had to deal with this. And if you're interested, just let us know, email or call us, and I can shoot them out. Sorry, I thought I had them at my fingertips, and I don't. So actually, I'll just see there. Yes, I'll send those out if you have that interest. Thank you. Just letting you know, WorkSafe in Victoria have advised their latest campaign is on falling objects. So this is primarily around construction industry. So the key risks, they tell us, unsecured loads, particularly where they're being raised up, suspended, lack of screens or tow boards up on scaffolding and platforms, wind and weather precautions. So once again, we're talking primarily outdoors construction sites. So you may be okay in just today's normal weather, but if a storm comes up, those loose items may blow off the top of a building or a construction area and fall out and strike someone. So the key controls that WorkSafe are going to advise they're going to be looking for, that you've cordoned off work areas. This is if it's a temporary work area like a construction site. Cover floor penetrations, holes in floors, either in permanent buildings or in construction temporary buildings. Install protection against overhead risks. This could be screening, mesh, so that small items can't fall down and strike people. And they'll be looking for the correct use of scaffolding and elevated work platforms, EWPs. So just a little tip what they're going to be looking for. So I mentioned earlier about as we get into the colder weather, we turn off fresh air and we want it recycled because we want the hot air to build up quicker in our car. And probably in the summer, we turn off fresh air as well and back to recycled, or our auto system on our climate control in the car does it automatically. So is this dangerous? So what we know is that humans breathe out, part of the gas we breathe out from fresh air is carbon dioxide. So when you are in a sealed car, which is relatively sealed, and we turn off fresh air, the level of carbon dioxide does increase in the car. So this is a known fact. It will increase. And the more people in the car, and with the fresh air turned off, then the amount of CO2 will build up quicker and to a higher level. So the question is it dangerous? And for those that may have had time to look at our newsletter this month for May, we can tell you the normal level of CO2 in the air right now, where you are, is about 400 parts per million. Okay, and clearly it's not dangerous because that's normal in our air at the moment. What we also know is that the workplace exposure standard, so Safe Work Australia, state 5,000 parts per million is the first trigger point for an 8-hour average exposure. And they say, bear with me, I think it rises to 15,000 parts per million is short term. This would be serious and cause respiratory distress and cognitive impairment. So if you get to that level. So the answer to the question is, and studies have shown this, practical studies have shown the level of CO2 in your car will never get to that level in normal circumstances. And it is okay to have your car on recycled air, both in the hot weather for the cooling and the cold weather for the heating. But they do recommend to turn it off occasionally and back to fresh air. It is always good because even an increase in the CO2 may not be dangerous, but it does tend to make you more drowsy. Maybe your reaction time will be a bit slower, just simply because you're more relaxed and a bit drowsy maybe on a long trip. And I'm told that some newer cars, maybe higher level cars, actually have a CO2 monitor and automatically switch back to fresh air if that detects the CO2 has risen to that level. I don't think my car has that. Certainly it's not mentioned in the manual. And so I'm not sure which models might have that, but we might expect that to be more common in the future as electronics become more common in virtually all new cars. So it's okay, don't panic. Yes, it will. CO2 does increase when you turn to the fresh air off onto recycled. It won't be dangerous, and particularly if it's for relatively short periods of time. I came across a couple of claims, articles recently where 2 manual handling claims had been rejected, and this got to court. So what happened here? So I'll just explain 2 cases. A painter lodged a claim on his employer, claiming that he had, as a painter, that he had to bend down to reach lower levels of the wall to paint it. Now, he won't be the only painter in the whole world that has to do this. So this is obviously a routine and a regular task, not abnormal. You'll have maybe long handles on rollers when you can, but sometimes you're using a paintbrush. And it's hard to imagine that a painter could avoid bending over at any time. So it's not desirable. We prefer to have a straight back and up, straight and vertical if we can for best ergonomics. But sometimes for certain jobs, we can't achieve that. And what we might do as an employer, either minimize that where we can, share the load when we can. So different people do certain tasks, maybe the load work, and they swap around. But essentially, the court concluded that the claimant failed to show what would be a reasonably practicable alternative. In other words, the court recognised, yes, bending over is not ideal as part of our job, but it is normal, it's routine, and we can't understand how that could be done any differently. So the failure to show a reasonably practicable alternative, how to eliminate that risk. And I think it was a similar one, the second case, where a lady, as part of stocking fridges in shops, rotated the 2-litre bottles around for the label to be shown. So customers come in and they want you and I to see the label on the bottle. And obviously we might be more attracted to it. And so the person said, I have to twist my hand to do this. Once again, a repetitive task. We spoke about that earlier. We know there's some element of risk. And once again, low level risk, routine task, unable to show any reasonably practical alternative that the employer could have done. So there was no other additional equipment, training or instruction that could have altered that risk. So the court's not saying the person didn't injure their wrist doing that job. What they're saying is there was no reasonably practical alternative. And that's the requirement on employers, is as far as reasonably practical that we provide safe workplace and safe tasks. So I just thought I'd share that with you. It's an interesting one because we often see relatively minor cases succeeding in workers' comp because the courts favour helping the workers because it's called workers' comp, not employers' comp. And so when in doubt, support the workers who may well be injured. And so this is one saying, well, we can't see how they could have reasonably have done anything different. And across the entire industry, it's not as if this business was doing anything different or more unsafe than anyone else. Just a bit on stockpiling fuel before we get to questions of the week. Petrol is regulated as a dangerous good, and petrol is to be stored and transported in approved containers. So look on the label, even the plastic containers. Some of them will actually be of a certain type and rated for carrying fuel. So you'll see they'll have that red diamond on them and some information to tell you that. And if somebody was transporting large volumes, so greater than 1,000 litres triggers the dangerous goods transport requirements. Hopefully no one's, just in their home and residential, transporting 1,000 litres. You'd need 5 200-litre drums. In the bottom left-hand, right-hand corner is an image of a 200-litre drum. You would need 5 of them to get to 1,000 litres in your trailer or whatever. But if you do, it triggers placarding of the vehicle, documentation, and a fire extinguisher, just to name a couple of things. So I just thought I'd mention that. I mentioned low incivility. Workplace culture and communication problems start with low-level incivility, people rolling their eyes, people, sort of half looking, yeah, I'm listening. These are the sort of postures and behaviours that annoy you and I if we're talking to our co-workers or to people who report to us, or in your family, maybe talking to members of your family, if they're like this, type of attitude. So what the research shows, focus on the little things, because this is where the culture builds. And so coach frontline managers and supervisors on the importance of tone and manner, which I've mentioned earlier. And our next public safety leadership course is not till September, but we often run them in-house as well if our businesses are interested. So finish off with our session this morning. What is the maximum distance workers can be from an exit in your building or factory? So in essence, it depends upon the class of the building. But typically it's 20 metres if you only have a single exit available, and that increases to twice that, typically 40 metres if there are if there's alternate exits. I can go this way or I can go this way, so there's 2 exits at least. I can now be 40 metres away from one of those exits. So if you want the fact sheet, and call or email if you want it in the short term. Our retainer clients will be receiving this mid-month as our fact sheet. Sorry I missed the chat thread line there. I do apologise, whoever put it up, and we've got this available if you want the fact sheet. So how frequently do we have to inspect workshop equipment? So it's not prescribed by regulation. So you've got lots of tools, you've got vehicle stands, you've got air compressors, and you've got hand tools and you've got power tools, handheld power tools as well. So these are not prescribed on frequency by the safety regulations, but typically you're expected to have followed the manufacturer's recommendations. So for every piece of equipment and tool that you and I buy, we get the manufacturer's manual or the little leaflet with their instructions. And so competent manufacturers and suppliers will provide you with instructions on how to use that item correctly and how to maintain it, which will include inspections. But just so you know, best practice is typically a pre-use visual check. This is very quick, a matter of seconds. I pick it up, I look at it, I make sure there's no exposed wires, it's not broken, it's not cracked, the brakes are working if it has a brake system. Either monthly or quarterly or 6 monthly formal checks in your workshop. And we recommend, and most manufacturers will recommend, some annual service or major check of your equipment. So there's some basic tips on that. Our next safety networking event is on contractor inductions again, but we're drilling down online versus face-to-face. What's better? How do you do it? And what should be included in your contractor inductions? So this will be a relatively informal, interactive discussion and meeting over a morning tea. So if you want to join us here at our Clayton office, just contact us anytime to reserve your place. So thank you for joining us once again. Andrea once again was busy and out of the office this morning. So thanks, Andrea, for your help with preparation before today. Thank you for joining us. And as always, thank you for your support. And we look forward to catching you next month. And thanks to those who put up some questions in the chat line ribbon. Often when I'm presenting and talking, I don't have time to answer all of them. I do apologise. But Sarah in our admin goes through all of those. And of course, if any of your team missed today, it'll be uploaded to our website, a recording of this webinar early next week. So thanks once again, and bye everyone. Thank you.